In the dusty heart of modern-day Iraq, beneath layers of shifting sand and silence, lie the remains of a world that changed everything. This is Sumer, the cradle of civilization, where humanity first stepped out of the shadows of prehistory and into the light of recorded time. It was here, over 6,000 years ago, that the blueprint for our modern world was first drawn. Before the cities, before the kings, there was only the marsh. 6,000 years ago, the Persian Gulf reached much further inland. This was a world of reeds, water, and thick, fertile mud. Here, a people we call the Ubaidians began the slow process of settling down, building the very first permanent homes. The environment was a brutal teacher. The Tigris and Euphrates were not gentle rivers. They were volatile giants. Without warning, they could burst their banks, turning a home into an island or a grave. To survive here, the settlers had to do more than just farm. They had to engineer. They began with simple ditches, leading river water into the thirsty soil. Over generations, these ditches became a sophisticated network of canals and levees. This wasn't just about water, it was about cooperation. You cannot build a canal alone. You need a community, a plan, and eventually a leader. By 4500 BC, the Ubaid culture had spread across Mesopotamia. Their pottery, decorated with simple geometric patterns, tells us of a shared identity. But something was shifting. The small villages were beginning to cluster, forming the seeds of the world's first true urban centers. Then came the Uruk period, the true dawn of the city. While the rest of the world was still living in scattered tribes, the people of Sumer were building a metropolis. Uruk, the largest of them all, was a sprawling maze of brick and life that would redefine what it meant to be human. The secret to Uruk's success was the mud. Without stone or timber, the Sumerians turned to the earth beneath their feet. They invented the mold-made brick, allowing them to build higher, faster, and stronger than anyone before them. Millions of bricks formed the walls of their world. In the heart of every city was the temple. The Sumerians believed that their cities were literally owned by the gods. Uruk belonged to Anu, the sky god, and Inanna, the goddess of love and war. The temple wasn't just a place of worship. It was the city's warehouse and its heartbeat. As the population grew, the needs of the city became more complex. How do you track thousands of sheep or the labor of 10,000 men? The human brain was at its limit. To keep the city running, the Sumerians had to invent a way to make thoughts permanent. It began with small clay tokens representing goods like oil or wool. By pressing these into a clay envelope, they created a record. Eventually, they realized they could just draw the symbols directly on the clay. This was the birth of pictograms, humanity's first steps toward literacy. Over centuries, these pictures simplified into wedge-shaped marks, or cuneiform. Written with a reed stylus on wet clay, this script could record everything from tax receipts to the most beautiful poetry ever written. The invisible thoughts of a person could now survive for thousands of years. With writing came education. The Eduba, or tablet house, was the world's first school. Here young boys endured long days of strict discipline, learning to master hundreds of complex signs. It was a difficult path, but it led to the most prestigious job in the land, the scribe. But life wasn't all work and study. The Sumerians were masters of the arts. They played harps inlaid with gold and lapis lazuli. They told stories of heroes like Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, who traveled to the ends of the earth to find the secret of eternal life. The Epic of Gilgamesh is our oldest written story. It deals with themes we still struggle with today: friendship, the fear of death, and the search for meaning. In Gilgamesh, we see the Sumerian soul, a people who felt deeply and questioned the very nature of their existence. Social structure in Sumer was a rigid pyramid. At the top was the king, the Lugal, or En. Below him were the priests and nobles, then the scribes and merchants. At the base were the farmers and laborers, who kept the whole system fed and functioning. The Lugal was more than just a ruler. He was the shepherd of the people. He was responsible for maintaining the canals, leading the army, and ensuring the gods were pleased. If the crops failed, or the city was sacked, it was a sign that the king had lost the favor of heaven. To maintain that favor, the Sumerians built larger and larger ziggurats. These were not tombs like the Egyptian pyramids. They were platforms for the gods to descend to earth. Every city-state competed to have the most magnificent staircase to the heavens. Inside these temples, the priests performed complex rituals. They offered the gods food, wine, and incense. They examined the livers of sacrificed sheep to predict the future. For the Sumerians, the world was a giant puzzle of divine signs and omens. Sumerian science was equally advanced. They were obsessed with the stars, believing they could read the intentions of the gods and the movements of the planets. They were the first to map the constellations of the zodiac that we still recognize today. Their math was based on the number 60, a sexagesimal system. This is why we have 60 seconds in a minute and 360 degrees in a circle, while the rest of the world struggled with simple counting. The Sumerians were calculating the movements of the moon. Trade was the lifeblood of the empire. Since Sumer had no stone, metal, or timber, they had to get it from elsewhere. Their merchants traveled as far as the Indus Valley in modern Pakistan and the mountains of Turkey, bringing back gold, copper, and cedar. On the rivers, unique round boats, called kufas, carried grain and oil. These were made of woven reeds and coated in thick bitumen to make them waterproof. They were the trucks of the ancient world, moving tons of goods every single day. But with wealth came envy. The city-states were not one united nation, they were bitter rivals. Cities like Lagash and Umma fought for generations over a single fertile field. The world's first recorded wars were not over religion, but over land and water. Warfare in Sumer was a professional affair. The stele of the vultures depicts the army of Lagash marching in a solid phalanx, trampling their enemies underfoot. This was organized, state-sponsored violence on a scale never seen before. As the wars escalated, the technology of killing evolved. The Sumerians were the first to use the wheel for combat. Their four-wheeled chariots, pulled by wild asses called onagers, were the tanks of the Bronze Age, meant to shock and terrify the enemy. By 2300 BC, the Sumerian city-states were exhausted. Centuries of infighting had left them vulnerable. To the north, in the land of Akkad, a new kind of leader was watching. His name was Sargon, and he had a vision that went beyond a single city. Sargon was a brilliant tactician. He replaced the slow-moving Sumerian phalanx with fast, mobile archers. One by one, the great cities fell. Sargon did the unthinkable. He united the entire region under his rule, creating the world's first multi-ethnic empire. The Akkadian Empire changed the rules of the game. Sargon put his own governors in the Sumerian cities and standardized weights and measures. He made sure everyone knew who was in charge. But he also respected Sumerian culture, adopting their writing and their gods. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Shin, took it even further. He declared himself a god, the first king in Mesopotamia to do so. On his famous victory stele, he is depicted as a giant, climbing a mountain of his defeated enemies to meet the sun. But empires built on blood often end in blood. A massive drought, combined with pressure from mountain tribes called the Gutians, brought the Akkadians to their knees. The centralized system collapsed, and Mesopotamia spiraled back into a dark age of chaos. Out of this darkness came one final, brilliant flicker of Sumerian light. The city of Ur rose again, led by a visionary named Ur-Nammu. This Sumerian renaissance was an attempt to return to the old ways, but with the wisdom of the new era. Ur-Nammu was not just a builder, he was a lawmaker. He created the world's first written legal code, centuries before Hammurabi. It was a remarkably humane system, focusing on financial fines rather than physical mutilation. He sought to bring justice to the land. This was the era of the great ziggurat of Ur, the most complete example of the form that survives today. It was built with 3 million bricks, each stamped with the king's name. It was a statement to the world. Sumer is back, and it is eternal. But the world was changing. New groups were moving into the region. The Amorites, a nomadic people from the west, were slowly infiltrating the Sumerian cities. They didn't come as conquerors at first, but as migrants, looking for work and food. Then came the environmental catastrophe that no king could stop. Thousands of years of irrigation had a hidden cost. The water of the Tigris and Euphrates contained small amounts of salt. As it evaporated in the fields, the salt stayed behind, slowly poisoning the earth. By 2000 BC, crop yields had plummeted by 80%. The great surplus that built the cities was gone. Starvation led to civil unrest. The cities of Sumer began to eat themselves from the inside out, even as invaders gathered at the borders. The final blow came from the Elamites to the east. They sacked the city of Ur, carrying away the statue of its god and the last Sumerian king in chains. The Lament for Sumer and Ur records the heartbreak of a people who saw their world end. Sumer was gone, but its DNA was everywhere. The new masters of the region, the Babylonians and Assyrians, built their empires on Sumerian foundations. They used the same script, worshipped the same gods, and told the same stories. Sumer became the Latin of the ancient world. For nearly 4,000 years, the very existence of Sumer was forgotten. It was only in the 1800s that archaeologists, digging for the lost cities of the Bible, realized they had found something much older. They had found the beginning of the human story. Today, we are the heirs of Sumer. When we write, when we check the time, when we live in cities, we are following a path they cleared for us through the mud. Their rise and fall is a reminder of our own fragility and our limitless potential. Their story is our story.